railway company, which is, I don't speak Dutch, so excuse my pronunciation, the Nederlands Spoorwegen. And then I mentioned a number of cities in the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Germany. Certainly if you're working into Spanish, they're virtually all different in Spanish. So you'll have to do there'll be a bit of brain power required there. There are lots of figures, lots of dates, and lots of kind of, not so much percentages, but more like sort of passenger numbers and things like that. And then I mentioned a number of services offered by the Thalys. So the Thalys Neige, like snow, Thalys Soleil, sun, Thalys World, Thalys Club Plus. I'm not going to tell you what they are. You'll figure it out when it's mentioned in the speech. Then I mentioned Air France and KLM, the two airlines, and a film called The 1517 to Paris, which was directed by Clint Eastwood. And finally, I talk about another company called the Easy, I-Z-Y, Easy. And once again, it'll be clear from the context. Okay. Is that clear for everyone? Maybe you can just give me a thumbs up if it's okay. Okay. Right. Without further ado, let's get things started. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure if you read the news about Europe...
Bonjour tout le monde.
Sorry, I can hear someone interpreting. If you can all mute yourselves, please. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'll start again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure if you follow the news about Europe, you'll hear a rather gloomy picture. It's all about the lack of solidarity between member states, problems related to migration, a lack of competitiveness, stagnant economic growth. It's all a bit depressing, frankly. But I think that what we have achieved in Europe over the past 70, 75 years has been quite remarkable. We've managed to achieve relative peace and prosperity for the first time in our history. And there have also been great successes in the area of infrastructure projects. If you think of Airbus, the big aircraft manufacturer which works across several EU member states, or the Eurostar, which connects the UK to the European continent, or the topic of my speech today, the Thalys. Now, you'll probably know the name, the Thalys. You may have seen the distinctive burgundy trains at a number of European railway stations. You may have even traveled on it yourself. But I suspect, like me, you probably didn't know much about the origin of the Thalys, or some of the sort of nitty-gritty, some of the figures related to the Thalys. I've learned quite a lot about it by preparing this speech. So the origins of the Thalys go all the way back to 1924. In 1924 already, there was an express service between Paris and Brussels. It wasn't called the Thalys, and it wasn't quite as fast as the current day Thalys, but the idea was already there to connect these two major European capitals. And by the 1970s, the rails between the two cities had been upgraded to such a degree that it took only 2 hours and 30 minutes to travel from Paris to Brussels. Then in 1987, a decision was made to create a high-speed line to connect the cities of Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, and Cologne. And then in 1993, the railway companies of the four countries involved, so the SNCF in France, the SNCB in Belgium, Nederlands Spoorwegen in the Netherlands, and Deutsche Bahn in Germany, all agreed to operate the service under the banner of the name Thalys. Now let's talk about the name for a moment. You might be mistaken for thinking it's the Greek goddess of travel or wind or some sort of ancestral homeland, but in fact the name Thalys doesn't mean anything in particular. They just wanted a name that sounded good in all the different languages and that didn't have any sort of negative connotations. So Thalys is just an invented name. And then moving forward to the 4th of June 1996, the first Thalys left the Gare du Nord in Paris and arrived in Brussels 2 hours and 7 minutes later. Now, those of you who have taken the Thalys between Paris and Brussels will know that it no longer takes 2 hours and 7 minutes. It now takes around an hour and 20 minutes. That's because the tracks have been upgraded and the trains have been modernized. And now it only takes just less than an hour and a half to go between these two cities. And over the course of that 1 hour, 20-minute journey, the train reaches a peak speed of 300 kilometers an hour. So it really is a very fast train indeed. So I've told you a little bit about the history of the Thalys and how it came into being, but where can you actually go using the Thalys? So I mentioned already, you can go from Paris to Brussels, to Amsterdam, to Cologne, but there are actually other destinations, and the range of destinations has broadened over time. So you can now go to the city of Aachen in Germany, or Düsseldorf in Germany, Liège or Antwerp in Belgium, or Rotterdam in the Netherlands. There are even special seasonal services that are put on by Thalys. So for example, you have the Thalys Neige, French word for snow, obviously, which takes you to the Alps, to some of the ski resorts, or the Thalys Soleil, the French word for sun. So for your summer holidays down to the south of France, to Avignon, Marseille, or beyond. So now you know where you can go. Let's look at the actual business of the Thalys and where their customers come from, what are the main routes that they operate, the most successful routes that they operate, and how many passengers do they have. So the target markets are France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. And by far the most successful route that the Thalys operates is Brussels to Paris. And that accounts for 55% of the revenue. So definitely the lion's share of the revenue is from Paris to Brussels. And then Paris to Belgium, to other parts of Belgium, excluding Brussels, accounts for 9%. Paris to the Netherlands, 21%. Paris to Germany, 12%. And other services like the special services to ski resorts and to beach resorts for only 2.5%. So it's really quite a small part of the business. And revenue and passenger numbers have grown very steadily since the Thalys was launched back in the mid-90s. The earliest passenger figures that we have are from 1998. And in 1998, 4.72 million passengers took the Thalys, so just shy of 5 million passengers. And last year, that figure almost doubled to 8 million passengers. So it's been a huge success story. And in terms of the passenger profile, it's about a 50-50 mix of business passengers and leisure passengers. If you travel on the Thalys, you'll often see people in suits, people going from, for example, Paris to Brussels for business. It's used very regularly, for example, by people from the ministries in Paris who work for government ministries who have to go off to Brussels, to the European Commission. And for these regular travelers, there are a number of loyalty programs, a little bit like what you get on an airline where you can collect points. And so there are different programs. There's a free loyalty program called Thalys World, which is the one that I have, for example. It doesn't cost me anything, but I can collect points. I have an online account. It saves my journeys, my past journeys. So if I need to, for example, print out a receipt or something, I can do it very easily. I can just go on and get access to my previous tickets or previous receipts. But it's not fancy in any way. But there are a number of different levels of service, and the top level of service is definitely the premium Thalys Club Plus service. And that offers you huge flexibility. You can change tickets at the last minute without having to pay. You can get access to the Thalys Lounge. You get invited to lots of swanky VIP events. So if you're looking for luxury, you will have to pay for it. It's quite an expensive service, but it definitely comes with a number of perks. So as I say, this is quite similar to some of the loyalty programs operated by airlines where you can collect points and so on. And that's not the only similarity that the Thalys has with airlines. I know it's a train, it's a rail service, but there is a connection to air travel here as well. As you know, Paris Roissy Airport and Amsterdam Schiphol Airport are two of the biggest airports in Europe. They're really hubs for travel into Europe. And you'll probably also be aware that in 2004, the two airlines of the Netherlands and France, KLM and Air France, merged. And the distance between those two airports, between Amsterdam Airport and Roissy, is about 500 kilometers. So this is kind of an awkward distance in a sense. It's quite a long drive or quite a short flight. So to bridge the gap between the two, the Thalys is really ideal. And living in Brussels, personally, I sometimes see this when I look for flights to, say, Latin America or Asia. Sometimes if I type in Brussels to Buenos Aires or Brussels to Bangkok, sometimes the airport code in inverted commas, is a little bit strange for Brussels. It's not the airport in Brussels, it's actually the railway station. So what you can do is you can book a Thalys ticket from all through, say, the Air France or KLM website. You can book a ticket which includes the Thalys from Brussels to Paris or Brussels to Amsterdam, and then an onward flight to wherever you want around the world. And it's very convenient. You do all of it through one website on one ticket. And when you go to the station here in Brussels, you can check in your luggage like you're checking in at the airport. And you don't have to take your luggage off the train or anything. All that heavy, awkward luggage gets put on the train and gets checked through, right through into your final destination. So it's incredibly convenient. It's a prime example of what transport experts call multimodality, when you can use several modes of transport in one journey without any problems. And it's also good for the environment, because we know how harmful short-haul flights are for the environment. The time when airplanes produce the most emissions is at takeoff and landing, and that's obviously a big part of a short-haul flight. So it's very good indeed, very good news all round. So what I've told you so far has all been very positive, but of course, over the years, there have been a number of challenges for the Thalys. Deutsche Bahn, for example, pulled out of the consortium and no longer sells Thalys tickets through its website. There have been a number of minor accidents, but probably the most famous, or rather should I say infamous, incident involving the Thalys was back in August 2015. There was actually a terrorist attack on a Thalys. An assailant got onto a train which was going from Brussels to Paris, and he tried to kill a number of passengers. But he was actually confronted by 3 passengers who tackled him to the ground and managed to prevent him from carrying out this terrorist attack. And the incident was widely reported in the media, and it was actually turned into a film called The 1517 to Paris, which was directed by Clint Eastwood. And something that was interesting about this film was that the real-life passengers played themselves in the film. Now, I haven't seen this film, I can't recommend it, but if you're going to watch the film, perhaps now would be a good time, given that you've got a lot of time on your hands. So I've given you a lot of the advantages of the Thalys, that it's comfortable, that it's convenient, there are regular train services and so on and so forth. But definitely one of the downsides of the Thalys is the cost. It's an incredibly expensive way to travel. It costs, if you book at the last minute, it costs about €100 one way. But with that in mind, the Thalys has launched another service called the Easy, IZY. And this was launched in 2016. And its business model is really inspired by low-cost airlines. So you can only book the the train tickets online. You have a limited luggage allowance. There are fewer members of staff on board. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no dining car. You can't go and buy a snack or a sandwich or something. It's also a slower service because it doesn't use the high-speed lines in France. So as I said, the Thalys takes about an hour and 20 minutes. The Easy takes around 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on the train that you take. But I've taken it a number of times, and I have to say it's a perfectly good alternative to the Thalys if you're not very in a hurry, if you don't absolutely need to be there in an hour and 20 minutes, if you have a little bit more time in your hands and you don't absolutely need to eat something on the train or buy something on the train or use the Wi-Fi. It's perfectly acceptable. On the whole, I use the Thalys very regularly. Well, I used to when I was able to. And overall, I'm very impressed with the Thalys. It's a very comfortable train. It's very convenient. The staff are very professional, very friendly. And it's definitely a sustainable business model at the moment in this era of flight shaming, where we're trying to fly less and we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. And I also think it's an excellent idea to have launched a low-cost model, because really it wasn't accessible to everyone. The regular Thalys is out of most people's price range. So having a low-cost variety really makes it a much more affordable option. So on the whole, I'm a big fan of the Thalys, and I encourage you to take it whenever you can. And thank you very much for your attention.